And welcome back, footy fans. Here we are again, another episode of the VFL Vantage show where we run and cover the VFL and VFLW. Joining me, my VFL expert, Mr. Brendan Rhodes. Brendan, great to see you, sir.
Yeah, great to be with you again, Donnie. It's been a few weeks, but yeah, love bringing the footy to the American people, and yeah, hope you enjoy the show.
Yes, fantastic. Again, as we've kind of mentioned in a couple of my previous shows, I've had a few things go on in my personal life, so we kind of pushed this back a week. So we're actually covering 3 rounds, so this is going to be a lot. So let's jump right into it, sir. Before we get into it, we've had 3 rounds in the men's, 3 rounds in the women's. We are 6 rounds in each of these competitions. Just a real quick thoughts on how this is going because some some results that I've been fascinated by and just some interesting results on both sides of the ledger, both the men and the women's comps.
Yeah, really hard to get a handle on what's actually going on in some of these competitions. It's really evenly matched, uh, with teams able to beat anyone else on any given day. It makes it it makes it hard to follow, but it's great for football. Make no question about it. Some of the big things that's happened over the past 3 weeks in the VFL, I suppose you can't really look past the fact that the Northern Bull Ants finally broke their drought, 371 days. Um, Sydney Swans were the victims last year. Sydney Swans were the victims again.
Hmm.
They're proving that they're the best red and white team in the VFL, you could say, the Northern Bull Ants. They had a great win over the Swans a couple of weeks ago. I was there and saw it. Sydney, very, very disappointing, make no question about that. But the Preston team to get a win, and you just see the smiles on their faces after the game, and just the feeling around the place. It's just an amazing feeling, and you can't help but feel happy for them.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Definitely with the men's is the Queensland teams looking really good on their ladder, and the women's a little bit of fluctuation. The Southern Saints and Essendon Bombers both not at the top of the table, so very fascinating how the VFLW is going as well. So let's jump right into it, kind of like we did the last time. I will go through round three in the men's. Through three, four, five, and six really quickly. We will go over kind of how things have gone through, and then we'll kind of just cover one game that we think that Brendan thinks was the game of the round to really discuss real quick, and then we will move on. So then we're not here for 2.5 hours trying to cover 50 games worth of footy on both sides. So we'll jump right into it. Back to round three. I know it's a little bit of a jaunt for Brendan here because of that. So we'll start off. Again, Brisbane Lions get the 118-51, a 67 win over the Collingwood Magpies. North fall to Carlton, 98-46. The Williamstown Seagulls knock off Port Melbourne 124-47, an impressive 77-point win there. GWS knock off the Coburg Lions 113-67. Southport fall at home to Werribee 86-63. The Richmond Tigers fall to the Footscray Bulldogs 80-57. The Suns go to Sandringham and beat the Zebras 67-50. Essendon knock off the Northern Bull Ants 88-65, and KC Demons beat Frankston 109-49. And rounding out the round, Box Hill Hawks knock off Geelong 107-52. Some cracking games here, sir. What would you say is the game of the round for round three in the men's round three?
We'll touch on the two quickly up near the top, because they were the ones that we really looked at last time that we were together. The Brisbane Lions and Collingwood went into that game, both teams undefeated, absolutely on fire, and I think we were split over who we thought would win that game, and the Lions just flew out of the blocks and destroyed the Magpies. They kicked, I think, something like 6 or 7 goals in the first quarter from memory, put them to the sword, ended up winning by 67 points. And since then, that form's been franked, with the Lions being still undefeated, as you mentioned, and Collingwood sitting down in seventh spot on the ladder. With, I think they've now lost a couple of games. So it is a very even comp, but the Brisbane Lions, yeah, a quality outfit. 5 goals to 2 in the first quarter, and yeah, never looked back in that one. Um, so they've shown that they are a genuine premiership fancy, the Lions. The other one was the Good Friday game between Williamstown and Port Melbourne that you mentioned. It was a flip of the coin. We had no idea who was going to win that game, and in the end, it was all one-way traffic. It was probably the best football that I'd seen Williamstown play in about 4 years. They were absolutely unstoppable. The Borough had no answer on that particular occasion, and really Williamstown could have even won that game by more, and they showed that after finishing 20th last year, they are right in the mix. And the other one would have been the big win for Werribee over Southport at Southport. Werribee, their first two games of the season were played up in Queensland, and to come back 1-1 could really set up their season, as has happened since then. They're well down on the ladder, but that's only because they've had a couple of buys. But yeah, a great result there for the Tigers.
That's the one thing that I look about. I know I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but the ladder is so interesting because so many teams have had buys in different weeks. It's like some teams have played four, some teams have played six. So it's just been kind of crazy to kind of like the ladder is gonna kind of fill out as the year goes on, but it is kind of helter skelter because you're not 100% sure where some of these teams fit because some teams only have 4 games and other teams have 6. So it's fascinating. So jump to round 4. It starts off with the Crackers. Carlton knock off Richmond 68-59, a 9-point win there. A battle of Queensland as the Brisbane Lions knock off Southport 116-97. Sydney, even at home, cannot stop the North Melbourne Roos 121-79, a 42-point win there. Geelong goes to Werribee and gets a 13-point win, 60-47. The Borough bounced back after a tough game the previous round, beating the Northern Bullants 88-63. Williamstown continues its great form with a 110-56 win over Coburg. Box Hill knock off Collingwood, making it 2 losses in a row, 114-55. Frankston go to Sandringham and get a big win, 82-56. And the Casey Demons with a nice solid 40-point win on the road at the Hangar against Essendon. So another some big blowouts, a couple of cracking games here in round 4. Thoughts on round 4 and game of the round for you, sir?
Well, Brisbane Lions and Southport was billed as the game of the round, and that's the way it turned out. And once again, the Lions were too strong. It was some late goals from Southport that pulled them back into the contest. They've come good since then, the Sharks, but they were 1-3 after dropping that game to the Brisbane Lions. So there were some question marks over the Sharks, whether they were quite as good as last year. And the Brisbane Lions, well, 5-0 as they stand right now, and they've beaten some very, very good teams to do it, dominating that game against Southport. North Melbourne, well, we thought they'd be big improvers. We didn't think the Swans would drop off as much as they have. Injuries playing a big role with the depth at Sydney, but still some pretty ordinary football. They would have expected to win that game, the Swans, but didn't. Werribee, well, you can see right there, 5 goals, 17-47.
Mm-hmm.
That's woeful kicking for goal, and that's the reason they lost to Geelong, 22 scores to 15, and were beaten convincingly. So that they basically handed back the victory over Southport in that particular game. So that knocked them back to level pegging. And Frankston, I think if I remember correctly, that was the first time they'd beaten Sandringham at Sandringham in 9 years. So a fantastic result there for the Dolphins that really franked what Danny Ryan is doing, the coach of the Frankston Football Club. And yeah, they proved that they will be a little bit better than expected this year as well.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting, and good to see some of the non-attached ones get some wins. Unfortunately, against another non-attached team, but good to see them getting some points on the board. So we jump to it, round 5. Wow. First game of the round just blows my socks off. I thought it was impressive seeing the WA score that I saw against West Coast, but this is pretty darn impressive as the Brisbane Lions go to GWS and get a 83-point win, 157-74. Wow, that is impressive, impressive scoreline. Jump down, Footscray hosts the Sharks as the Sharkies get back on the winning ways, 102-76 over the Bulldogs. Box Hill smash Coburg, 124-53. Carlton edge out the Sandringham Zebras, a third consecutive loss for the Zebras, 71-68. Collingwood bounced back after a couple of losses to get a 97-89 win over Essendon. As we had stated at the start, the red and white game sees the Bull Ants finally get a win after a while, 93-66. The Gold Coast Suns with a smashing of the North Melbourne Rouge, 136-80. Casey Demons fall to the Richmond Tigers, 94-82, and Werribee with an absolute thrashing of Williamstown, 154-61. Impressive scoreline, sir. Just really quickly, I know I ask you usually the game of the round, but was this as nuts scoring wise as you could see with this Brisbane game? 23-19 kicking. This could have been worse than it was.
Definitely could have, and that's the difference between those two teams. See GWS as being around about that middle of the road team, around the wild card section at the end of the year, anywhere from probably 6 to 15 they could finish, whereas the Brisbane Lions are, in my mind, a top two team, and I expect them to at least play in a preliminary final, if not a grand final. To go to Sydney and get that result was probably more impressive than actually getting that result. Except if they'd done that at home, it would have been no surprise at all. But to go to Sydney and win so convincingly is another example of just how good this Brisbane Lions team is. I did the Footscray Southport game. It was the best game of the season I had seen to that point between two teams. It was basically goal for the entire game. But Footscray kicked themselves out of it in the last quarter. They had 10 shots at goal and finished with 8 behinds, 1 out on the full and 1 fell short. So that's why they've ended up losing by 26 points, and Southport able to get their season back on track with that result. The Sunday, as you just mentioned, I don't think I've seen a day of football quite like that in a long time. 2 single-figure margins, as you mentioned. Carlton did their best to lose, but got out of jail against Sandringham, 9-17 to 10-8. Collingwood came from behind to beat Essendon by 8 points. Gold Coast, well, they're still undefeated, so they're flying, not a problem. Beat North Melbourne quite comfortably. North had a few injuries in that game, which didn't help. But on the very same day, with the other 3 results, we had the Bull Ants, as I mentioned, win their first game in 371 days, 16 losses in a row. The Casey Demons lost at home, which was the first time since, I think, about May 2021 that they'd lost a home game. And only the first home, and that was the only home game they'd lost in 4 years. So they've lost at exactly the same time as the Bull Ants have won. And, well, I said about Williamstown, with that amazing performance against Port Melbourne on Good Friday. Well, Werribee kicked 5-17 one week. The next week they kicked 24-10, and there's the difference in how you win games of football. If you kick goals, you win games of football. And they kicked, I think, 10 goals to nothing in that last quarter, Werribee, to blow that game out from about 5 goals to 15. And that just proves once again what Werribee is capable of, and we've got another contender sitting right there, even though they're 14th on the ladder right now, but 2-2.
But still early, and again, only 4 games. So a couple of the teams have 6. So it's the ladder is not gonna be. It's probably gonna be around 12 or 13 before we really start seeing the ladder kind of shape. I think the way we're kind of thinking it. And again, it just improves the adage of bad kicking is bad footy, and it's so true. Seeing some of these results too, and again, I know it's VFL, it's not AFL standard, so we can't always think, well, why are you kicking 20 behinds? I mean, this is a different game. The level is a little bit different. It's still very, very good footy, but it is a little bit of a different level compared to what most of us see when it comes to the AFL. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah,
so
the way to sort of explain it to your audience would be, well, it's college. It's the second tier of football here in Australia. So and it's full of AFL and former AFL listed players. So you certainly can't make excuses for teams kicking 8 points in a quarter, as Footscray did, to lose their game, or 17 points as Werribee did to lose theirs. Frankston lost a game to Williamstown earlier on in the year, kicking 116 in 3 quarters. those are games that the coaching staff walk away tearing their hair out
Hmm.
and wondering why they bother. And then the following week, you can just come out and kick amazingly accurately, and you win a game of football that you maybe not expected to win. And that's why we love this game so much.
Yeah, consistency is something that no matter what level, if you can get it, you can harness it, you can be very, very good. So a jump to it. As I'm noticing at round six, it looks like a little bit of a lighter schedule. Just really quickly before we go through the scores, why so few games? I think I only see 6 games. Only 12 teams played this round. Was there a specific reason why? Not to kind of throw you off with a question out of nowhere.
No, they do have the odd round like that. They've got to fit. I don't know why they have 4 buys per team across 22 rounds. Some of the AFL aligned clubs want that. They want those
Hmm.
extra rests. Others don't. And the ones that don't actually play scratch matches amongst themselves
Hmm.
in their bye rounds just so they get games. But when you've got to fit 21 teams by 4 buys, that's 84 buys. You've got to fit that into 22 rounds.
Hmm.
So to give every team the same number of buys and the same number of rounds, sometimes you just unfortunately have to have rounds where 9 teams have a week off on the same day, and it's as simple as that.
Okay, that's I kind of thought that was probably it, is I think I did see with it being a 21 round season and only playing 18 games. I'm like, that's pretty much four buys for every team. So that's going to be fun. So
Yeah,
only a 6 game schedule for the last round that we're going to discuss on the men's side at least is Footscray get a 5 point win over Carlton. Looks like a cracking game here where the behinds were the reason that the bullies get the win there. Southport bounce back in a game that honestly, looking at the scoreline again, 20 behinds. This could have been uglier on Northern 128-46, an 82 point win there. Gold Coast again staying undefeated, getting the win over Richmond 137-64. A cracking game between Coburg stayed with the Cats for a while. Cats also kicked 20 behind, so another one where I think the Cats kind of kept Coburg in this one 56-48, an 8 point win by the Cats. Giants just edge Port by 2, 73-71, and Casey get a bounce back win over Box Hill on the road 106-76. 6 relatively really good games, sir, and a couple of crackers there with Coburg staying with Geelong and Port just falling short to GWS.
yeah. Even though there was only 6 games, there's something to talk about on all of them. The
Mm-hmm.
Footscray Carlton game, very similar to the Footscray Southport one from the week before that I was talking about, where at 3/4 time, the scores were very close between Footscray and Southport. And when the Bulldogs kicked 8 points in the last quarter, Southport ended up winning by 4 goals. At 3/4 time in this one, Footscray was 4 goals in front. So when they kicked 5 points and no goals in the last quarter, and Carlton kicked 4 goals, they had to make up that 4 goal deficit, and they weren't quite able to do it. Footscray actually kicked 110 in the second half. So they were 8-5 at half time, and they finished at 9-15. So they very, very nearly blew another one, the Bulldogs there. And they were, in the end, it was only some real desperate defending right at the final, right down the final stretch that saw them hold on to win that game. It was an exciting finish, but certainly I think both teams would be disappointed with how they played a bit in that game. Southport, as you'd expect, made short work of Northern Bull Ants up in Queensland. The Bull Ants probably still riding a high from the victory the week before. At one stage, I think Southport kicked 2 goals 10 in the second quarter, which is what helped things blow out there towards 18-20. The most impressive victory of the round belongs to Gold Coast, who finishes round 6 on top of the ladder, 5-0, real premiership chance. They've got no injuries at the moment, perfectly fit squad, and they played 22 AFL listed players in their 23 for this game, which is the maximum they can play. You have to pick an under 21s player in the team. So they had to put one extra in, but they were basically perfect strength. And remember, Richmond had beaten Casey at Casey the week before.
Mm-hmm.
And so for Gold Coast to win at Richmond by 73 points, that's a real bellwether game for Gold Coast that tells us all that that they're right in the mix as well. Geelong 620. Can't say much more about that. Coburg desperately unlucky not to get the win and make the Cats pay, but Geelong out of jail. GWS and Port Melbourne, as we both saw, the Giants on the Swans on Saturday in the AFL, when a lucky snap out of the pack just clears the goal line and GWS has a win. On this occasion, Port Melbourne player Anthony Anastasio had a snap from 20 metres out right on the siren. The siren went as the ball was in the air. It bounced right near the goal line and went the wrong side of the post. So once again, GWS gets the luck and gets the victory. That's the
Wow.
way it is. And I did tell you that that Footscray and Southport was the best game I'd seen all season to that point.
Hmm.
Box Hill and Casey topped it. I was down at Wonthaggi, which is a small town of about 10,000 people, 2 hours southeast of Melbourne, right down on the Gippsland coast. It's the first time they've taken a game down there. Box Hill trying to build a relationship with the Bass Coast Council down there. Casey also recruits a lot of players from that area. It's a very strong football region. They had free entry on a Sunday. The men and the women both went and played down there. They had about 3,000 people come through the gate, and they turned on an unbelievable game of football. And a lot of AFL fans over there would be familiar with the name Jake Melksham,
Hmm.
who is a Melbourne senior player. He's played over 212 he's played 212 exactly AFL games of football. The highlights package that he put on in this game has to be seen to be believed. If you get onto my Twitter at B Rhodes VFL or at VFL Twitter and look at the Smithy snags, the goals of the week. The number one goal kicked by Jake Melksham. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, Donnie, but go and have a look. Ben Brown, another Melbourne star coming back from injury, he's kicked the ball inside forward 50. It's about a metre out in front of Melksham. He's stuck his foot right out in front of him, toe poked it up in the air, Gaelic football style, managed to catch it, ran 4 steps hard up against the boundary line and snapped it through a goalpost high from 35 metres out.
Mini Christmas.
As
Just the
good a goal as you
explanation
will
is
ever want to see.
impressive. Oh,
Just an
I
absolute freak show it was.
I will definitely take a look at that. But
Yeah,
just the
if you
explanation
can
is
find it,
impressive.
and yeah, share it out to all our friends in America, because if you're already amazed at what some of these guys can do, you will almost fall off your chair when you see that, because it was ridiculous. Box Hill had probably 4 of the best 5 players on the ground behind Jake Melksham. He was that good that's how Casey has run out 5 goal winners.
Wow, absolutely impressive. I would definitely take a look at that once we are done here. So that is going to do it for insane rounds of footy there, and we've still got half of the results still to go through. We will jump over to the women's side, and we would jump back to round 3. I know it's a little bit back ways, but we will definitely do this because I had to chuckle in this. Brendan knows this. I tipped round 3 and I totally went for a flyer in this round and I got it right. And I had to chuckle a little bit as I sent him a message that like the next day and went, "Oh my God, I called it." So it was kind of funny. So and we'll go to it as we had said that the Port Melbourne Williamstown again play also in the women's again, not nearly as historic a rival as the men's. Williamstown falls to Port 26-20 in this one, and the game that I was talking about in a result, in looking at the result, I cannot believe that it is this scoreline. The Western Bulldogs get a win 54-15 over North in that game. Again, I was a total and complete flip of the coin guess on that one. Somehow the fates did me right in that one. Collingwood goes to Casey and gets a win 42-25, which is rather impressive there. Again, Darabin's woes continue as Geelong with a smashing of the Darabin Falcons 78-2. And not to be outdone, Carlton then smashed defending premiers Essendon 68-14, with the ending as Box Hill goes to the Southern Saints and gets a win 54-25. Some results, sir, that probably by history are a little shocking.
Yeah, definitely. The Bulldogs had threatened, as we discussed last time, they'd threatened in the first two rounds. I think they'd lost by 1 point and 3 points or something along those lines. Um, North Melbourne went into that game undefeated, and the Bulldogs hadn't won since the last round in 2021, 16 losses in a row. So what an amazing performance. It can happen that when a team that has been struggling gets their tails up and they can sniff a victory, that they can run away with it, and that's what they did. So it was wonderful for them to get that win. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to get another one with the series of close losses since then. There's only been one game where they've been convincingly beaten, and yet they sit at 1-5. So they're much improved this year, but they're still second last on the ladder, the poor old doggies. Remember in round two, Casey kicked an all-time VFLW record of 130 to beat Darebin on 8.
Mm-hmm.
Collingwood then knocks them off 7 days later, and Casey hasn't won a game since. So
Wow.
that is quite a weird one, and that can happen in the VFLW depending on what AFLW players are made available for selection,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously there's a few missing for Casey at the moment, but that was a great win for Collingwood, the 2019 premiers. Darebin unfortunately have lost a lot of key players, which means they're having a battle this year. Hopefully they can get through the year as best as possible. They showed some competitiveness in round 6, which we'll talk about a bit later on. And Essendon, well, they were really off early on in the year. Carlton actually kicked 7 goals to nothing in the last quarter to win that game, 10 goals to 2. So it was very close for 3 quarters, and then the floodgates really opened for the Blues. So we were asking a few questions of the Bombers by this stage when they were winless after 3 rounds.
Yeah, definitely for sure. We jumped to round four, and again, as you kind of said, Darabin's kind of struggling a little bit. So unfortunately, they fall to Williamstown 43-21. As you said, the Doggies close games. They're playing tough, competitive games, which isn't a bad thing. It just kind of, it really just, you feel gutted for these young ladies because they're giving it their all and they're just falling short. They just fall short to Port Melbourne by 3, 36-39, an absolute cracker there. Carlton go on the road to North and get a win 51-16. Geelong knock off the Southern Saints 17-7. As you said, Casey, unfortunately, after that big win over Darebin, has found their road a little bit of a little bit more tough sledding, as you kind of said. Sometimes it's the AFLW listed player sometimes can affect that. As Essendon get a 2-point win, 37-35. Again, probably a game that Essendon probably should have won by more with that 13 behinds there. And Collingwood goes on the road to Box Hill and gets a 24-point win, 45-21. I mean, I would say Essendon Casey is the game of the round just because of the upset, but Southern Saints dropping another one is a little bit shocking. At least again by the history of the VFLW, Southern has usually been a very strong side.
Well, they have. They came from fifth last year to make that grand final when they went down to Essendon. So they do have the ability to be up and down. They can beat anyone, but they can also lose to anyone. That game, as you saw the scoreline, 17-7. Those 3 Sunday games were actually played in driving rain all day, and there was a lot of water lying on the ground early in the morning, in particular at that Saints Geelong game at Trevor Barker Oval. The Saints, I don't think, scored after about halfway through the first quarter. They had 1 goal, and that's where it finished. They have a lot of close games with Geelong, and the Cats usually win them. For some reason, it's just the way it turns out. Essendon finally breaking through for that first win. They held off a fast finishing Casey in that game just to get themselves over the line, and they haven't looked back. They haven't lost a game since, so they've got themselves back in the top 6 and starting to look ominous. Collingwood, well, once again, they've shown that they can beat anyone and lose to anyone. That's a wonderful victory over a very good Box Hill Hawks team. You mentioned the Western Bulldogs. There's another close one. That's 3 single-figure losses in the first 4 rounds to go with that victory. So, and Darebin and Williamstown, if I remember rightly, Darebin might have been in front of that game at halftime, but didn't score in the second half as Williamstown ran away with a drought-breaking win of their own.
Mm-hmm. and I love the parody. The parody in this comp has been fascinating. It's really cool to see it, and it shows you that as we get more and more young girls in the talented, I think it's going to make this competition so much fun. And again, with the kind of changes that you're going to see with AFLW players coming in and out, it's really going to test the coaches on can they increase the depth of their squad. Besides the AFLW, I'm noticing it with the Sample W that I'm keeping an eye on, and the Waffle W as well, is that there's additions of the AFLW can kind of change a team's complexion, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad,
Yeah.
depending on how it's going. So it's been fascinating to see, and you can definitely tell those AFLW girls usually are a step ahead. They're just a little bit more classy with the ball in hand, different things like that. But to be able to let young girls see what these women who are playing in the top elite division can do, I think is only inspiring. So this is great to see. Absolutely love it. So we jump to round five again, trying to go off topic there a little bit, but
No,
again,
I just
I
agree with
just
you
absolutely love it.
quickly. Yeah, agree with you absolutely. The more that those AFLW players play in this competition, the more that the younger players see the standard, and it makes the VFL much stronger, and it creates a lot more AFLW standard players. So hopefully the clubs will keep releasing their players to play with the younger girls and bring them through quicker.
Definitely, for sure. We jump to round five at Box Hill. Falls to Port Melbourne 56-30, a 26-point win by the Borough. Essendon go on the road and knock off Collingwood 31-15. Geelong beats the Bulldogs in the one game that you did say was a little bit more comprehensive than several of the starting season, with a 28-point win, 43-15. The Seagulls go to Carlton and knock them off by 35, 45, 10. Darabin, a little bit better of a performance, just falling into the North Melbourne Roos by 38, 57, 19. And the Southern Saints bounce back after a couple of not so great performances, keeping the pain on the KC Demons 59-17, a 42-point win by the Saints there. Another fascinating round of footy, a little bit more blowout centric, a little bit, but some absolutely good games, especially that Collingwood Essendon game looked like a cracker.
Yes, it was. Essendon just a little bit too good. Collingwood coming off a couple of very nice wins, as we just mentioned. But the Bombers, yeah, they're just starting to wake up. They're just starting to get a couple back. The signs are there. They've still got a fair way to go to get back to the level they were at last year, but they're just starting to hover. So they're a team to really watch in the second half of the year, which is only 1 week away. But the one that really jumps off the page right here is clearly the upset of the season in either VFL or VFLW, and that was Williamstown Carlton. Williamstown entered this game 1-3, 11th on the ladder. Carlton entered this game 3-1, top of the ladder, and Williamstown won by 6 goals, by 35 points, and never looked like losing. It just jumped off the page, and it made you look and think, what the hell happened here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the Seagulls showed that they're heading in the right direction. They've got a couple of Sydney Swans AFLW players who came out of Williamstown originally. They've been allowed to come back and play. And they're making a little bit of a mark. Carlton may have rested a couple and underestimated Willie a little bit, but yeah, that's the result that really turned heads there. The other one was the Friday night game. It's the first time the VFLW had been given a standalone Friday night game with no VFL football on to compete with it, and Port Melbourne turned it on against Box Hill. What a performance that was. The Hawks dominated early, should have built a lead. Port Melbourne defended and didn't let them get away. And then once they got going, it was a terrific performance. And Port have now found themselves second on the ladder and flying after finishing in 10th spot last year.
Fantastic. And it's great to hear. And I think if I remember correctly, the two players for Williamstown, just because I try to keep an eye on this one East girls, is Bridie Kennedy and I think Alicia Newman are the two that are
That is
down with
correct. Alicia
Williamstown.
Newman and Bridie Kennedy, yes.
Yeah, I've been keeping an eye.
Both originally Williamstown players. They'd been around the place a bit. Alicia Newman was recruited to the Swans from Collingwood,
Mhm.
but has been allowed to return to Williamstown for games this year. I think they're sort of playing around about half the season, but what they're doing, their leadership and the experience that they've gained, even though the Swans didn't go that well in the AFLW, what they're able to impart on the young Seagulls girls is obviously paying dividends.
Hmm. Yeah, it's fantastic. And the best part is it lets them get a run during this time because unfortunately the Sydney comp is not nearly as advanced, unfortunately. And again, this is no disrespect to
Yeah.
the Sydney comp and all of it, but the VFL is a little bit higher, a much higher standard of footy. So it's great to see a couple of the Swans girls getting back down to Victoria and being able to compete in a competition that will keep them sharp for this upcoming season. Now that we've had Swans
I
radio on the VFL Vantage, we
I would actually
apologize.
love to see a lot more of them. A lot
I
more of
would
them.
agree.
I'd love to see, like, you can play up to 10 AFLW listed players in a VFLW game. So I'd love to see that happen. Maybe not the full 10, but maybe 6 or 7 playing.
Hmm.
Um, that would make Williamstown very competitive. Unfortunately, obviously it pushes a couple of players out, but those players will learn a lot from training with these AFLW players, and they'll play better football at the local level, and they'll come in and be more ready to play at the next level when they get their opportunities.
That'll be fascinating. I cross my fingers that maybe that they find a way. I know it would throw the comp a little bit off, but could you potentially ever see a GWS in Sydney trying to get into the VFLW just to kind of keep their girls sharp a little bit more because of the fact that the Sydney comp, unlike this SANFL and the Waffle, when it comes to it, the Fremantle West Coast with the sample, and then both Port and Adelaide can let their girls go play the state leagues because of the difference when it comes to season time.
Yeah, I certainly can. I certainly can see it happening. I would like to see it happen. In fact, um, just to just to give those girls the chance. Like the Swans, as we saw, the team was only thrown together in 6 weeks leading up to the start of last year's AFLW season, so they just weren't ready to play well or gel as a team. So imagine how much of a benefit they would have got from having a team, their whole team, play in the VFLW this year, and even if it was sort of as a on a invitational sort of basis, even
Hmm.
uh, just so they can play games and be ready. The hard part that would hold it back would be once you get to around about 3 weeks out from the finals, the AFLW pre-season kicks into gear, and
Hmm.
a lot of these clubs then pull their AFLW players out, put them
For
into
preseason
pre-season, put them
training.
into cotton wool to prepare them for round one of the AFLW season. So
Exactly.
if the Swans and Giants were to have a side in the VFLW and then did that, um, you
They
would
wouldn't be
find
able
that they would
to.
fall away very, very quickly.
Yep, unless they had a big enough list that they could be able to go get through that, which I unfortunately at this present point they don't. So now that we've had our fun little AFLW little step off, we'll go back to round six again. We apologize. I love talking women's footy, and I think this is fantastic. So I genuinely appreciate you having that conversation with me there. So we'll jump to it. Round six, last round that we are reviewing. Southern Saints get a big win over the Western Bulldogs, and again, the Western Bulldogs continue to play tough footy, just not being able to get over the mark. But this shows there's something going right for the doggies. A 5 point loss, 31-26. Collingwood get a win over Darebin, a much more competitive Darebin team, 59-33. Cats get a big road win, 28-22 over the North Melbourne Roos. Box Hill smashed the Casey Demons 50-17. Essendon go to Williamstown and just edge it by 9, 30-21, and an impressive win by Port 23-8 over Carlton. A fantastic round six, a couple of cracking games, game of the round. Am I jumping Southern Saints, Western Bulldogs?
Yes, no. You'd have to go with that. There's those two games. There's two games right there that were decided with the very last kick of the game. would you believe? And that
Mhm.
was one of them. The Bulldogs were leading right up towards the end. I think the Saints kicked 3 goals in the first quarter. The Bulldogs kicked 3 goals in the second quarter. Then neither team kicked one in the third. And then you go into the last quarter. There was nothing in it the whole day. And then Tessa Boyd kicks a goal with 80 seconds on the clock to give the Southern Saints a 5-point victory over the Bulldogs. So that's now, what are they? They're 1-5, and we worked out that's 4 games,
Mhm.
4 games that they've lost by under a goal.
Yep.
So it's got to be
Keeping their
heartbreaking for
percentage
them.
tight though.
Oh, it's kept the percentage good. Yeah, it would be heartbreaking for them to lose so many close games. But by the same token, they were losing these games by 80 points last year. So that tells you
Mhm.
how far that they have come. So they've got to look on the positive side of things in that way. Reese Kahir, the new coach there, um, he's got to be, I suppose, really pushing home to the Bulldog girls that, yeah, we're not quite getting over the line, but remember what happened last year. The steps that you've taken have been out of this world, and
Mhm.
and yeah, once it turns, once they work out how to win these close games, they're going to cause a lot of problems. Geelong and North Melbourne was the other one. Olivia Ciccolini for the Cats. The scores were level, and Ciccolini had a set shot from about 25 metres out, and it just dropped over the pack, over the line by about a metre for a goal to win the game. And the
Wow.
siren sounded as the ball hit the ground.
That's
So
insane.
that's how close that one was. That's actually the second time these two teams have played this season. So the vagaries of the draw that you play 3 teams twice, and that's a double up clash. North Melbourne won by 9 points in round one. Geelong has won by 6 points in this round to retain top spot on the ladder. 5 wins and 1 loss. So a very good result there for the Cats. 5 in a row after losing that round one game to the Kangas. Um, go to the Sunday. Much improved effort by Williamstown. They did kick the last goal of the game there to get back within 9, but that just shows that how much they've improved, because I think Essendon beat them by 10 goals last time they played last year. Um, Box Hill and Casey down at Wonthaggi, that was a real head turner. I expected that to be a flip of the coin game, but the Casey Demons are well and truly off the boil right now, so with a fair bit of work to do. Here's an interesting one for you. Casey Demons against the Southern Saints last week in round 5, their quarter by quarter scores were 1-1, 1-2, 1-4, 2-5. Against the
Wow.
Box Hill Hawks, it was 1-1, 1-2, 1-4, 2-5.
Evening
I have
Christmas.
never ever seen that before in 35 years of watching footy, where the score has been absolutely identical 2 weeks in a row for one team.
That is mental. That is
Every quarter,
absolutely
every
mental.
quarter exactly the same.
Mental.
And Carlton going goalless against Port Melbourne, 0-8 they kicked in that game. So they would be left to rue a game that got away for them, as they've dropped from top of the ladder to out of the top 6 in the space of 2 rounds in a very even competition.
Yeah, it just shows you can't be off for more than a couple of weeks, and it totally throws you off. It'd be absolutely fascinating. Again, that is a lot to go through, and outstanding by you, Brendan. There, the knowledge of this, and again, this competition has been fantastic. The parity in the women's is absolutely fantastic. The men's a little bit more lopsided, but some really good results. So fascinating to see. So we'll go from that. We'll go to the burning questions again. Again, I have 2 questions for the men, 2 questions for the women's. We'll start on the men's side. As we kind of said, the two best teams, just by kind of results, reside in Queensland, as Gold Coast and Brisbane are two of the top tier teams in the competition. Who do you think can sustain this ability to stay at the top of the ladder the longest, or can they both get to the later stages of the season still top of the ladder?
I have absolutely no doubt that they can. They're both playing wonderful football. They're both very healthy at the moment, which is the real key factor. Gold Coast, as I mentioned earlier on, had an entire squad of AFL listed players in their VFL team. They do have a longer list than every other AFL club. I think they're allowed to have 46, where every other club only has 44 with their rookies as well. That's gradually coming back as part of the equalisation measures that they were given in 2019 to try and help them become competitive. I think they were allowed to have 52, and they've gradually had to pare that back. So it was 46 this year. I think it comes back to 44 again next year on their overall list. But when everyone's fit and healthy, you see what happens, and they win games, and they're winning them convincingly. The Brisbane Lions, well, they both these teams made preliminary finals last year, so they're not flash in the pans. They're very, very hard to beat at home. They're coming away and winning. Brisbane Lions have a big test this week. They play Carlton at Carlton, a ground where they've been thrashed at twice in the past 2 years. So it'll be interesting to see if they can come down to Carlton and get the job done there. It'll really make people say, hey, yep, these two teams are the teams to beat, alongside the Casey Demons, who, notwithstanding that one loss they had to Richmond, the football they played against Box Hill just shows how even they are. There's not a bad player in that team. So they are the three standout, clear best teams in the competition right now. As long as they stay fit and healthy, then they will almost certainly fill top four spots at the end of the year. And the other spot in that top four, we could go to any one of about 8 sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason that I kind of stated it the way it is because the fact that Casey has that extra game, so that's they're 5-1, where Gold Coast and Brisbane are both 5-0. They do have a bye compared to Casey, so that's why I kind of phrased it the way I did as the top two. Because again, with the unbalanced ladder a little bit with the buys is kind of like I said, it's going to even out as the season goes on, but it is kind of. I know somebody's going to come in
A
and
little
say
bit skewed.
Casey's in
5-0, 5-1,
second.
5-0.
And I'm like, well, they have also played an extra game and they didn't win, so they're just by volume of games it is a little bit different, but still great. So, and then I have to mention this again. Williamstown is in the top 8. I think we all kind of looked at Southport as being the one team that we had discussed last year that was the only non-attached side that got in that was not an AFL attached team. Williamstown's in the top 8 right now. Again, early, 5 games in for them, still plenty of season to go. Do you think they can stay in the top 8, potentially push for finals, or is it still way too early, only 5 games into their season?
It is very early, but I did tip Williamstown to make the top 10 at the start of the season, as it is now with the wild card round. I'm calling it a top 10. 6 teams make the finals, and then 7 to 10 play off for the last 2 spots in our regular top 8 competition. What they showed against Port Melbourne proves that they absolutely do belong in the upper bracket of the competition. What they showed against Werribee is why they're probably around about that 7 to 10 mark rather than the probably 4 to 6 mark. They're a very, very good team. They've brought a lot of experience back into their team. Ex-AFL players. They've recruited out of sight. They did lose a few good players. So I think anywhere from anywhere from probably 7 to, they could finish as low as 15th if they fall off the radar. But I would be disappointed if I was a Williamstown supporter and I didn't at least play a wildcard final.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. Again, Port's there in 10th. I think the team that we had kind of discussed again have only played 4 games is the Werribee Tigers, sitting there in 13th. So there's still a lot of footy to be played, but it's fun. It's fun to look at it and to see that the unattached 5th, 6th, 10th, and 13th there. So at least the unattached teams aren't just floating at the bottom of the ladder with all of the AFL squads being up there. So
I clearly see those 4. I clearly see those 4 standalone teams. Southport, Werribee, Williamstown, and Port Melbourne all being good enough to make the top 10 at the end of the season. So we wait to see whether they can sustain it for a whole year. We certainly hope that they can. But there was only one made the top 8 last year, as you mentioned, in Southport. I tipped I tipped all 4 of them to sneak into the 10. I had Werribee in 4. I had Southport in 4th. I had Werribee in 5th. And I had Williamstown and Port, I think, around about 8th and 10th, somewhere around that mark. So they're all good enough. If they can stick it out, it'll be a great final series if we can get those 4 standalones in.
Be fantastic, absolutely, for the competition for sure. So we've got our 2 questions. Now we go to the women, and I'm fascinated on this, but 6 games into the season, again, 12-game seasons, and we're basically around halfway through. They're basically around halfway through the women's season, and unlike the men, it's every team has played 6 games. So we really the ladder is really set up. So top 2 sides are Geelong and Port Melbourne, which is attached with Richmond in the women's comp. So it's not the same as the men's where they're an unattached side. So is this a surprise for you that these are the top 2 sides 6 games into the season? Or could you see a little bit of a changing of the guards compared to your Essendons, your Collingwoods, and your Southern Saints?
Well, we are heading to the midway point of the season this week. It is 14 games, so rather than 12. So there is
Yep. Yep.
so seven is the midway point of the season where it really starts to take shape. But nothing can really surprise me in the VFLW, the Rebel VFLW competition, just for that exact reason that we've discussed with the how many AFLW players might be released on any given week to play in a game. Like that game between Casey and Darebin, poor old Darebin had to front a Casey team that had 6 or 7 Melbourne AFLW premiership players in it, and 5 of those haven't played since. So that's sort of it makes it really tough for poor old Darebin. Casey could have picked a different week to unleash the quality of team that they put out that day.
Mm-hmm.
The surprises, Essendon's slow start, but they're going again. Casey struggling now, sitting down in 9th or 10th spot on the ladder, which is a real surprise for me. But apart from that, yeah, there's no real surprises. Port Melbourne did finish 3rd in the home and away season in 2021. Then they fell away to 10th last year. Both Geelong and Port lost their first game in round 1. They've both won 5 in a row. So, yeah, I would say I'm surprised a little bit that they are 1st and 2nd, but I'm certainly not surprised that they're in the top 6.
Awesome. Yep. It's been fascinating. Like I said, and I wanted to mention this because we had discussed a little bit how the Western Bulldogs have played so many close games. They actually have a better percentage than Essendon, who's in the finals right now. They have a 94 percentage, and Essendon has a 75. That just shows you they're so close. In fact, they're also above North Melbourne, who is 8th with 88.8%. That is it just shows you they're playing close games. They're just snake bitten when it comes to it. So I was pulled up the ladder because I wanted to double check it. It's just fascinating to see that the second to bottom, the 11th out of 12 teams, has a percentage that would beat 2 teams above them, one even in the finals. That's absolutely insane. So, and then we had kind of mentioned a little bit. What is your biggest surprise so far in the season? Again, as in the parity, not everything has surprised you. What's your biggest surprise so far this year? 6 games through with 1 game short of halfway. And then who is your biggest disappointment so far?
Well, I'd have to go with the Bulldogs as being the biggest surprise, even though they are 1 and 5. Last year they had a percentage of 14, and this year they've got a percentage of 94, as you just mentioned. So that's the big thing. We knew that they had to recruit a lot. They did recruit reasonably well, but they were very, very quiet in the off season. There wasn't much said about who they brought in. They lost a couple of their. They only had 2 or 3 really good players last year, and they lost them. They went to other clubs. So there were big question marks over them. You'd hope that they'd be a little bit better, and they've been outstanding. They could for a little bit of luck, instead of being 1-5, they could be 5-1, and they'd be sitting right up there in 3rd
Off the
spot on the
ladder.
ladder.
Yep.
The disappointment has got to be, for me, the Casey Demons. They they've come out, as we've mentioned, put a record score on the Darebin Falcons, and now they haven't won since. They've dropped 4 games in a row. They're sitting ninth on the ladder. They've been beaten convincingly in the last couple of weeks by the Saints and the Hawks. They really need to turn things around very quickly to get themselves back on track, because they are a much better team than ninth on the ladder in a competition where there's probably 9 genuine finals chances, and that's with no disrespect to Williamstown and the Bulldogs.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So again, it is fantastic. I love keeping an eye on it, and to see the competitiveness of this competition has been fantastic. So again, I know we take a couple of weeks off, but I always like doing tipping because it's a little bit of fun. I'm gonna have some fun with this. So let's tip it. Round 7, we'll start with the men's competition. I'm kind of confident. I took a real quick gaze to see it. I think a lot of these I think are pretty self-explanatory, but I'm interested as somebody that dives into the VFL as much as you do. Let's go through it. First game of the round, Icon Park in Victoria, Carlton v Brisbane. I'm gonna go off trends here. I think Brisbane just a little bit too strong. Carlton, I think at home will be a little more competitive, but I just think Brisbane too strong on this one.
Agree completely. I think Carlton are a very dangerous team at home. They are certainly capable of turning the Lions over, but it's very hard to tip against a team that's sitting undefeated on 147% and going so very nicely. So yeah, the Lions to win for me. I think though that it should be a fair bit closer than a lot of people might think.
We jump up to Heritage Bank Stadium up in Queensland as the Gold Coast Suns host the Casey Demons as the kind of it's the same as the men's as the AFL start off. So who do you like in this one?
Definitely the match of the round, isn't it?
It's
The
definitely
undefeated
intriguing for
Suns.
sure.
Yeah, this is their we last week was their first big test coming down to Melbourne to play a Richmond team on a high and winning convincingly. That really sets them up. If they the only game Casey lost last year was their only trip to Queensland. They went down to Brisbane in the last game before the finals, so that sort of is something that they will want to overturn. Um, they've had a long road trip, or you can't really call it a long road trip because it's only about an hour from Cranbourne down to Wonthaggi. So they travel an hour to games pretty much every week from there. Um, very, very hard one to tip this one.
Hmm.
I'm going to lean towards the Suns 5-0, 188%. At home, I would definitely pick Casey here in Melbourne, but at home, I'm going to go with the Suns, but there's the old signal. Flip of
Yeah,
the
it's a,
coin.
it's a coin toss. I agree. I was gonna say that this is one of those where I think home field advantage will be big. I got the Suns in this one, but I think this is an absolute masterclass game. I cannot wait to keep it.
Casey did win against the Suns in Queensland last year. Sorry, that did drop into my head. They won by about 12 goals, but that was on the training ground outside Heritage Bank Arena, and that was, I think, the week before the Suns launched into a 9-match winning streak to make the preliminary finals. So
Mhm.
they're a much, much better team and a much healthier team than they were that day.
Yeah, definitely. This is like I said, it's the trip up to Queensland. It's not easy again. It would have been the same if this would have been flipped and it had been a Casey. I probably would have tipped Casey just because a little bit of home cooking. It'd be fascinating to see that one again. Game of the round for sure. Just off paper, looks fantastic. One that's tough for me. And at Kinetic Stadium in Victoria, the Frankston Dolphins take on the Sydney Swans. I'm I don't like doing this. I really don't like doing this. But with the Swans injury issue, still with the top level team, they're still fighting it a little bit. I'm gonna tip Frankston in this one just because road trip never easy, tough one. Hoping the Swans can kind of bounce back, but it's never an easy trip to play Frankston.
It never is. It never is. The main thing that might help the Swans a little bit, they've never been down to Frankston before. This is their first trip down to Frankston Park. The thing that might help them is the fact that it is a lunchtime game. Frankston
Mm.
has the loudest, most passionate, most boisterous fans in the competition. They get down there, they stand in the pod on the hill, um, nice and juiced up for lack of a better term, and they pick opposition players out and they give them absolute hell. All friendly, but the Swans won't have that to contend with this week because being a lunchtime game on a Saturday, most of those people will be at their local footy in the Mornington Peninsula League. So there will still be an element of it there, but it won't be as noisy or as passionate as it normally is. So the Swans could potentially use that as an advantage. But yeah, I've got to agree with you. The injuries haven't helped, but the Swans have been terrible so far this year in the VFL. They were bottom four in 2021, top four last year, and this year they've been barely competitive. They've now lost 6 games in a row, counting the straight sets exit to the finals. And yeah, I agree with you. I'm going with Frankston to win this game.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to say, but it's just I just whenever there's a lot of injury issues in the AFL squad, the VFL squad is always going to be the one that takes the brunt of it even more than the AFL
Yeah,
squad there. So that one's
it
just
affects the VFL team first.
big time, absolutely, because the best VFL players move up, and then you get young players that are not Sydney Swans AFL listers. You're getting under. So it is a significant step down in talent. So that one's hard to argue this. Up to Blacktown in New South Wales as GWS hosts the Footscray Bulldogs. Oh, who do you like in this one?
Footscray's actually been to this ground twice already in the last 2 years and won easily on both occasions. Um, I think they're a better team than the Giants on paper. A bit has to be said about whether they can travel. Their kicking for goal has been an issue. Their second halves have been an issue. On Saturday, the third quarter, which they won by 3 points, 1 goal to nothing, was the only second half quarter they've won so far this season. So they need to build themselves a good lead by halftime. If they do that, you'd expect them to win. But I'm going to go for the Giants at home because I think Footscray, yeah, they're not performing to the level that they probably should at the moment, and they'll have a couple of held over for the AFL game as well. So I'm going for the Suns in a close one.
Yeah, Giants in this one. I'm gonna go with you on this one again.
Giants, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. It's the G's. They
It's all
throw you
about the
off.
Suns at the moment, isn't it?
You'd rather watch the Sun Stevens game if you're 100% honest with yourself. That's all completely understandable. I'll tip GWS, a little hometown cooking again, travel. And this has been surprisingly, at least in the AFL, it's been a kind of a hotly tested game. So I'd be interested to see if the VFL ever gets as testy as the AFL does with when these two lock horns. So Preston City Oval in Victoria as the Bullies take on Box Hill. I just think Box Hill's just a little bit too strong. Bullies will try to give some competitiveness as much as they can. I just think Box Hill is just a little bit too strong here, just a little too much talent with some of the AFL talent. We're down with the Hawks, so I have the Hawks in this one.
Yeah, the Ants have been competitive in every game except that one against Southport last week, when they, I think, were about level at quarter time and then got blown out of the water. Yeah, Box Hill played excellent football last week and would have beaten almost anyone but the Casey Demons down there in Wonthaggi. If they bring that again, then they'll be beating the Bull Ants and beating them pretty comfortably. No disrespect to Brody Holland's men.
Yeah, definitely. So GMHBA Stadium gets a nice VFL touch this week as Geelong take on Southport. What are your thoughts on this one? This one's intriguing for me, at least.
It is tricky because of where it is. Southport, as this is another first trip, they've never been to Geelong. So it'll be interesting to see how they go down there and handle the long, narrow ground. They do have a lot of ex-AFL players, though, who would have played there, so they do know a little bit about it. Geelong should have beaten Coburg a lot easier than they did last week. They have the ability to turn on a really good performance every now and again. but I think Southport should be too strong. If they're fair dinkum about being a top 4 team and a premiership contender again, then I think they go to Geelong and beat the Cats.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think with the roster that they have, like I said, the AFLers, I think will help kind of balance them out a little bit, though it is their first time. And if they want to be in the when the whips are cracking late in the season, this is a road trip you got to try to get 4 points out of. So I agree with you. I'm gonna go Southport on this one. A very mouth-wateringly good one at DSV Stadium in Victoria's Williamstown host the Collingwood Magpies. I'm this is one of those I'm gonna tip again. I'm not 100% sure on this one. Collingwood, at least in the AFL, is going really well. Their VFL has been kind of bouncing forth. I'm gonna jump on the train. I'm hoping the Seagulls can continue it. I'm gonna tip Williamstown in this one.
Williamstown is a very, very proud club. And had they had a bye last week, they would be absolutely spitting out the chips that they've stolen from people's fish and chips on the beach, the Seagulls. I know that's a very corny joke, that one, but
But it's good. I love it.
but there it is. There it is. Anyway, they will be breathing fire, I think. And here's an interesting stat for you: since Collingwood put a standalone team into the VFL, they've played at DSB Stadium at Williamstown Cricket Ground 8 times. Williamstown has won all 8.
Oh boy.
So
Talk about a
Collingwood
home
has
field
not won
advantage.
at this ground since July 1896. Since before the VFL competition broke away from the old VFA. So just on that basis, there, I know, all streaks have to end at some stage, but I think Williamstown has got significant motivation for this one, and they're going to be extremely hard to beat.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. I love that. That's a great stat. Another interesting one. Arden Street Oval in Victoria's North Melbourne hosts the Zebras of Sandringham. Who do you like on this one?
Yeah, well, once again, you talk about injuries affecting teams. What St Kilda has done to get through their injury list has been absolutely remarkable. Unfortunately, that has affected Sandringham pretty badly, um, and they've lost pretty convincingly most games. They almost knocked off Carlton a couple of weeks ago, but they are having a little bit of a battle to get their strength on the field. North Melbourne actually has a very strong list of non-AFL players. They recruited 5 players that were delisted off AFL by AFL clubs at the end of last year, and that's where their strength in the VFL is. And I think they'll have too much for Sandringham, and I've got the Kangaroos winning that by about 4 goals.
Yeah, that the injury list unfortunately has not deterred St. Kilda as much as it has for Sandringham again. They're bearing the brunt, unfortunately, of that extensive list there to start the season. Again, I think North at home against a weakened Sandringham team that still is not at 100%. So I'm going to tip the Ruies on this one. This one is mouth-watering. Last game of the round, Essendon at home at the NEC hangar in Victoria against Werribee. I gotta ask you on this one. How do you see this one? Because there's a lot of me that wants to tip Werribee because I think Werribee is in the running, but Essendon they've gotten a little bit of a groove, a little bit. We'll have to see. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, well, if it wasn't for Gold Coast and Casey, this one would be the match of the round. Although
Mhm.
although Frankston and Sydney should be a very close game as well. Um, a little bit of me, as you said, a little bit of you wants to tip Werribee. A lot of me wants to tip Werribee. I You just don't know which Werribee is going to turn up. If
Mhm.
it's the Werribee that beat Southport at Southport or beat Williamstown by 15 goals, then they go to the hangar and they beat Essendon with a leg in the air.
Mhm.
They beat Essendon by comfortably 6-8 goals. But if it's the Werribee that turned up and kicked 5 goals, 17 against Geelong, well, then
Mhm.
they lose. It's as simple as that. I'm going for Werribee. I think the Tigers are a quality team. They're a top 4, 5, 6 team. I don't think Essendon is that, and as a result, if the Tigers are fair dinkum about making up for 2 failed seasons, which the last 2 years have been for them, when they've underachieved compared to their talent, then they beat Essendon in this game.
Yeah, I'll go with you on that one again. I love seeing these non-attached ones have some success. So I'm gonna go Werribee. I agree with you. Hoping, crossing our fingers, we get the Werribee that went up to Southport and played really, really well. Not the one that couldn't find the center stick. So all of the games for the men's comp. We'll quickly jump over to the women's comp again. This one is going to be fascinating because just looking at some really, really interesting games here. Cannot wait to hear what you say. Preston City Oval Victoria, Darabin hosting Box Hill. Again, unfortunately, Darabin is having a tough time with it, and this isn't helping. I think Box Hill, and I think Box Hill quite convincingly.
Yeah, Box Hill wins this easily. It's great to see. It's the first time that Darabin and the Bull Ants are having a double header together on the same ground on the same day. Hopefully, they can build a relationship because they're right there in that same area of the inner northern suburbs of Melbourne. So they really need to work together any which way they can. But Box Hill wins that game and wins it easily, unfortunately for the Falcons.
Yeah, very interesting matchup here in Deakin University in Victoria as Geelong take on Collingwood. Who's tipping your fancy on this one?
Cats looking for 6 wins in a row. The Magpies coming off. I think was it a surprise defeat last week? There's been a lot of football. No, they had a win over Darabin last week.
Mhm.
Uh, Darabin kicked 4 goals in the last quarter of that one, which is something I'm sure that the Magpies would be a little bit disappointed about. Cats very hard to beat at home down there at Deakin University, so I'm going for Geelong in a close one. Not a lot in that game.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic one. I'm gonna go with the Cats on this one too. Again, home field advantage I think will be massive in that one. A very intriguing one to see. Can Casey bounce back at Icon Park against Carlton? I don't like the mojo of Casey right now. Carlton a little bit better. Again, neither team is in fantastic form on this one. So let's go. I'll go Carlton on this one.
Yeah, Demons are really in danger of falling out of touch with the top six now. They're already 6 points outside and simply must win. Carlton, they've lost 2 games in a row, so they're not going that great either. So it's a real flip of the coin job. There it is again. I honestly don't know. I think on paper Casey is the better team,
Mhm.
but at Carlton, yeah, who knows? Who knows?
It
Um,
is. This is literally like
Casey.
coin flip.
Yeah, I'll go for Casey. I think they're due. They're due to play a good one and get the win.
All righty, we jump ETU Stadium in Victoria as Port Melbourne take on the North Melbourne Roos in this one. Who do you like in this one?
Standalone Saturday night game this time. No VFL games to clash with on Saturday night. So Port fans, it's the second half of a. I think it's the second half of a double header. Didn't we work out? The I know the Borough, the boys have got the bye. The boys have got the bye this week. So it's the only chance that Borough fans have got to see their team. It's on Saturday night, so you can go to your local footy, then get down and support the girls. I think they will get a reasonable turnout, and I think they beat North Melbourne. Not a lot in it, but I'm going for Port Melbourne.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with you on this one too. Home field advantage again. Hopefully they if they get a good crowd, I think that'd be great for the ladies there. Port Melbourne just a little bit too strong on this one. I got the Borough. This one's fascinating for me. ETU Stadium in Victoria as the Western Bulldogs host Williamstown. This one's intriguing. A Doggies team that plays teams close and a Williamstown team that's finding their mojo a little bit. I'm gonna tip the Seagulls in this one, but I again, if the Doggies continue this ways, can they stay into this game and can they put a little bit of fear into the Seagulls late in this one?
Definitely. Fascinating and intriguing are the 2 words she used, and that is exactly what it is. That is exactly what it is. It should be a ripper game. Williamstown in really nice form, thrashing Carlton, pushing Essendon to the limit. The Bulldogs losing 4 thrillers and having one win. Um, I'm very very tempted to tip the Western Bulldogs. I think they've got a real show in this game. The big question is, do they know how to win a close one?
Mhm.
Because Williamstown, I think, will keep it close. It won't be a high scoring game by any stretch of the imagination. It'll be close. Will the demons of a tight game get into the Bulldogs' head as it gets down the final stretch, or will they find a way to get over the line and spark their season? Yeah, I'll go with you. I'll tip Williamstown, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see the doggies get up.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was as I say a lot with my keep an eye on one. This is definitely it. The doggies, there's just something about them. It'd be fascinating on this one. Again, Williamstown playing much really good footy, but the doggies are always close into it, and you just never know sometimes in those late games. So, and then rematch of the grand final. Southern Saints go to the hangar to take on Essendon, a couple of teams that form wise little not as solid as last year. So thoughts on this one? Essendon at home, the hangar against the Saints.
Well, the Saints, they've already had one grand final rematch this year back in round 2 or round 3, and the Saints won that comfortably over Essendon. Since then, Essendon have got themselves going. As I said, they're back in the top 6. They're starting to look dangerous. The Saints actually haven't played at the hangar yet. Their previous away games against Essendon have been at Windy Hill. So that could create a little bit as well. And I'm yeah, lose my train of thought. I'm going for Essendon. I think the Bombers are just starting to get the wheels rolling forward. They're out of the mud hole. They've got themselves unbogged, and they're just moving forward. And I think their consistency will be a little bit too much for the Saints, who bounce around a little bit with what they can produce.
Yeah, I'll join you on that one. I got Essendon on that one. Home field advantage, definitely a helper there. So wow. The only thing sometimes about missing a week is there's so much to talk about. That was a fantastic episode, Brendan. I love talking VFL football. I love your passion for it. It is absolutely fantastic. I know I'm passionate about footy over here, but to see somebody else that's also got that passion is absolutely fantastic. So, Brendan, thank you again for joining me again for another VFL run through.
Yeah, absolutely love coming on and speaking to you and bringing the game to the American people. And if you don't decide to watch the VFL match of the round, as we call it, between the Suns and the Demons, you'll be able to hear me on the corresponding game, which is Frankston and the Sydney Swans. That's 12 o'clock Australian time. So I'm sure you can pass on what that means for people in America, and you can
Yep,
pick
I
that
can.
one up
I,
on afl.com.au. I'm
yeah, I can.
pretty sure there's no blocks on it, so you can watch it anywhere in the world.
Yep, it is at least for me in the central time zone, it is a decent 9:05 p.m. So 10:05 Eastern, 8:05 Mountain, and 7:05 Pacific. So actually a decent time. So I may kick up the feet and try to watch this one Friday night. I know I've got a couple of sample W games I was going to keep an eye on, but I will definitely I'll keep a wink on this. I do have a really good friend who's a huge Frankston Dolphins supporter, so I may reach out to him and chit chat with him a little bit as the Swans play the Dolphins on that one. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for another episode of VFL Vantage. Keep an eye out. More State League recaps coming your way, AFL and more. And keep an eye out. An AFLW chat coming very soon. I use some of my connections in South Australia and have a very awesome South Australian player coming on the podcast this weekend. So keep an eye out on that. And we will see you again very soon with more episodes of Donnie's Disposal.